Let's get started. I wanted to cover some of the best practices and go into the agenda for this topic. Valuing data as companies grow more data and generate more data in Amazon S3. What are some of the challenges with defense in depth security and compliance strategy that customers can look into? And then I'll like to cover some of the security services, the native AWS security services that we have that can provide that layered security. What are some of the best practices that customers can take when it comes to protecting your data? And then we'll follow this up with actual live demos. So I'm very excited about that. One of my colleagues, Ryan Holland, is going to join us, and he's going to actually walk us through live demonstration of leveraging some of these security services to create that layered protection in Amazon S3. Data is valuable, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this. You guys are all data experts. If you're using Amazon S3 or you're using AWS's data services, data has gravity, which essentially also means that it's not only important for organizations to be more productive, but it also attracts bad actors or threat actors. We looked at some analysis from the value of data summary report published by the Bennett Institute here. And one of the things that stands out is that there are various different personas when it comes to data. There's small, medium, big data. There's also various different use cases that are being applicable to this data. And why that's important is that the security of that data then also becomes more and more important. And you have to identify who needs access to that data so that they can be productive. One of the key values that we keep in mind when it comes to AWS security services is the ease of use, which is trying to get out of the way of our customers and our users, but at the same time provide that protection that they need. So the reason I highlight this is that when it comes to the defense in depth for security and compliance, especially as it relates to data and who all has access to that data with the various personas that we look at it. It starts with things like having proper policy controls, having proper access and identity controls, making sure that the infrastructure that you're using the data on is, having the right infrastructure protection, using appropriate data protection when it comes to cryptographic controls, key management, etc. Threat detection, which ties into being able to proactively monitor and identify any malicious and or abnormal activity with the data access, having centralized monitoring and reporting around the data. And then finally, being able to respond to any introvert operations or any unwanted activity when it comes to data access. So you can see that there's a lot of layers in there of how customers can actually use some of these controls and services to actually protect their data. The three that I really wanted to highlight today, especially when it comes to compliance and best practices, around best policy practices is number one, have full visibility into your data. So customers often, when we talk to them, want to know exactly where their data is, especially as your bucket inventory in Amazon S3 increases and or you have objects that are continuing to grow in there. One, having full information on where those buckets are, who all has access to them, and then is there any sensitive data in those? That's something where knowing what all data do you have and where it resides is crucial. The second one is the proactive detection as well as the ability to identify any malicious and or abnormal activity around your data. And then orchestrating some automated response, making some intelligent decisions based upon that monitoring and threat detection. And then finally, often customers also want to know whether they are following best practices. So as again, your accounts and your Amazon S3 bucket inventory and object data store increases, you just want to know whether you're following the best practices and have visibility into that cloud security posture assessment with regards to compliance as well as configurations. And all of this is needed on a continuous and scalable basis, which is again very critical. As you grow your data estate, you need to have that visibility, as well as the ability to identify some of these security use cases continuously, as well as in a scalable manner. So AWS obviously offers data protection and infrastructure services that you can leverage, for key management, native encryption, as well as our infrastructure protection services. But apart from that, the three that I want to focus today are very much tied to those three use cases. Number one is Amazon Macie. Macie is one of our core security services that is focused on providing customers full visibility into where their Amazon S3 bucket inventory is, what all do they have in those buckets, and then more importantly, what is the security posture around those buckets. So this is to answer the question, which is knowing where your data is, and then more importantly, identifying sensitive data at scale. Secondly, Amazon Guard Duty, which is our core threat detection and monitoring service. So Guard Duty helps customers identify and detect threats proactively, and then help report findings on the basis of which customers can take intelligent decisions to stop those threats. More recently, Guard Duty has expanded its coverage to Amazon S3, which is where the threat detection use case comes very handy. And AWS Security Hub, which is our centralized monitoring as well as continuous cloud posture security assessment tool that gets findings as well as events from both native AWS services as well as from external third-party partner integrations, and then allows customers to create insights as well as aggregated events, and more importantly, evaluates continuous controls to answer the question whether their infrastructure is secure and are they following the best practices or not. So those are the three services that I want to highlight when it comes to putting that layered security on top of Amazon S3. Let's dive into a quick overview of each one of these. Amazon Macie. So Amazon Macie is a fully managed data security service that leverages pattern matching as well as machine learning to identify and discover sensitive data at scale. One of the core value propositions of Macie is when you enable the service, by default, it enumerates all the buckets that you have in your accounts, the objects that you have in those buckets, and provides you a security posture assessment of who all has access to that. This comes in the way of how many buckets are public, which ones are accessible by AWS principals, either inside or outside your organization, and more importantly, which ones are encrypted versus not encrypted. And that helps customers to then make intelligent decisions on prioritizing where they want to discover sensitive data. Now, the second important use case that Macie allows customers to do is to be able to inspect that data and identify what all is sensitive in there. So when it comes to Macie's core functionality, number one is gaining visibility and evaluating the security posture of their buckets at all times. It's a continuous feature. So as more buckets are added to your account and more objects are added to those buckets, Macie automatically updates and provides that ongoing visibility. Secondly, customers can then decide and configure sensitive data discovery jobs, which allow them to have full control as well as flexibility into defining where all do they want to inspect their objects to enumerate either PII, personally identifiable information, or PHI, healthcare information, financial information, and even credentials and secrets. That comes by the scale that Macie brings in the form of managed data identifiers. So Macie leverages pattern matching and machine learning, and as a managed service has built-in managed data identifiers in those four categories that help customers identify any PII in the form of findings. Macie can be managed centrally. So one of the core value propositions of being a native AWS service, it fully integrates with AWS organizations that allows the onboarding as well as managing the service from a centralized management standpoint easier. And then all of Macie's interface is available through management APIs, and the findings that are reported in the form of matches to the sensitive data, as well as any policy findings which are reported in the form of changes that are made to bucket policies, are all available in CloudWatch Events and EventBridge. That makes it extremely easy and extensible for customers to take actions on. When it comes to discovering sensitive data, Macie helps customers to identify the source targets in the form of S3 buckets. Those buckets can be selected across an account or multiple accounts, and then can be scheduled in the form of sensitive data discovery jobs. Customers can choose how often do they want to inspect that data, and then also can define the scope of where all within those buckets and which all objects within those buckets they want to inspect. Once that job is defined, Macie will then get to a task and will identify the sensitive data based on the built-in managed data identifiers in those 5 categories of financial, personal, any national identities, healthcare and medical information, or credentials and secrets. In addition to that, Macie also allows customers to build their own custom data identifiers that they can define in the form of regular expressions, and then that can be leveraged to also identify any sensitive data. So the use case that customers can help solve with this is especially for the compliance teams, where they are required to continuously monitor and answer the questions, if they're meeting regulatory compliance needs, whether it's GDPR or CCPA, California Care Protection Act, wherever there's private data or sensitive data, and how that's being handled within their Amazon S3 estate. The second service I want to focus on is Amazon GuardDuty. GuardDuty is a threat detection service. It's a one-click enablement option for AWS accounts that allows customers to then proactively identify any malicious access or anomaly detections, and is fully integrated with threat intelligence. It helps customers to not only identify malicious and highly suspicious activity in their accounts, but then also protects their accounts, workloads, and more importantly, data stored in S3. So with a single click, GuardDuty can automatically integrate in the backend with the telemetry that it needs. For example, whether it's CloudTrail APIs, whether it's VPC and DNS flow logs, or data plane events of S3. And that is how it can then identify any suspicious or malicious activity on the data access. It uses it provides 3 different types of findings. Number 1 are policy findings. An example would be an IAM principal has granted access to an S3 bucket. That is a policy finding that will be reported in GuardDuty so that customers are aware and their security teams are aware who all is accessing the data. Malicious access, which could be an example that we saw, a call coming in to the data from a malicious IP caller. So that is something that will be reported in the form of malicious access. And using its machine learning, GuardDuty also is able to highlight any anomaly behavior, which is something like an object read, which is unusual, and we saw large exfiltration of data from either a custom IP threat list or a known bad malicious IP or domain. So those are the 3 different categories: policy-based, malicious access, or anomaly-based behavior that are automatically reported and continuously monitored in GuardDuty. So GuardDuty helps security teams answer the threat detection and monitoring use cases. It's continuously monitoring and profiles the S3 data access events. One of the big benefits here is that it requires no additional configuration on behalf of the customers other than just enabling the service. It takes away the cost as well as the operational overhead required in either enabling CloudTrail data plane events separately and then inspecting them, or ingesting raw logs and raw events into third-party security tools. So again, being native to AWS Cloud, GuardDuty is able to build that channel automatically in the backend and then scale and then provide the value on an ongoing continuous basis. Finally, AWS Security Hub. If security teams want to centrally view and manage all the different security incidents and also want to automate security checks and responses, Security Hub is our go-to security tool. It is also an account-based service that enables customers to enable it on multiple accounts, manage it using the AWS organization's integration, and then it natively integrates with AWS native security services. So findings from Amazon Guard Duty, findings from Macie, and other security tools automatically flow into Security Hub. Additionally, it can be integrated with other partner tools to bring those events into Security Hub as well, where they can then be aggregated. And then more importantly, it's continuously evaluating controls in the backend and checks in the backend based on security best practice standards that are introduced here by AWS. For example, our own foundational security best practices, which has about 90 plus controls that are continuously monitored and evaluated, and then providing customers that insight into what is their current security posture look like and where are the gaps that they should go and address. And finally, it normalizes all the findings and events that are aggregated into Amazon Security Finding format and makes them available in CloudWatch events or EventBridge, from where customers can write their playbooks for remediation and response. So at a very high level, it provides that centralized monitoring to customers, and then customers have the ability to write custom rules using CloudWatch events or EventBridge, from where they can take simple operations such as notifying their security teams by using either ticketing or alerting mechanisms, or writing more advanced Lambda and step function operations to take custom remediation checks. They can also integrate the outbound findings into third-party SIM and or SOAR tools, where security teams would likely want to operationalize the automation and response activities as well. So when it comes to automated response and remediation, that is where Security Hub collects information and findings from native AWS security tools as well as third-party tools, and then allows security teams to have one centralized place from where they can actually operationalize and take actions for automated remediation. So that's where Security Hub comes handy. So finally, to summarize AWS security services working together to protect S3, number one, the value that they provide is visibility and control. We want to make sure that these are natively integrated with AWS infrastructure services such as Amazon S3, and then provide the simplicity to eliminate any operational overhead as well as tasks required to collect those logs, collect those APIs. We're continuously monitoring and providing that value being cloud native. And with that comes the scalability as well as the ease of management, being account-based services and fully integrated into AWS organization for multi-account management. They provide that one centralized place for security teams to go and monitor Amazon S3 access and visibility. And this all helps customers reduce costs. So these services are being used by some of our largest customers, also customers who are extensively using Amazon S3, and they have been seeing continuous value on this. And we have blog posts as well as reference content that is available publicly. So I highly recommend you to check those out. Finally, I want to close out on some of the resources. Each one of these services have their product pages that you can visit and learn more. They also highlight the Amazon S3 use cases, especially with Macie and Guard Duty. We have dedicated resources for Amazon S3. And more importantly, please stick around for the next session where one of our industry security specialists, Ryan Holland, is going to show you how some of these security services integrate with Amazon S3, and then the use cases that I highlighted, how do they come to light in AWS Management Console. With that, thanks a lot.
Awesome, Himanshu. That was a great talk. And there is so much more that I know you and Ryan are going to talk about in this upcoming demo. But there's some broad themes that I'm detecting. I want to play them back to you and let me know what your thoughts are here. But really what it seems to me is that it is significantly more cost effective to identify a security risk up front and even pay the cost of it continuously searching and do that, as opposed to retroactively dealing with the fallout of a potential security incident. And I'm sure we've seen examples of security incidents that could be so large that you'd pay any dollar amount to go back in time and not have them happen. And so really, we see this as sort of an end-to-end. You mentioned Security Hub, Macie, and Guard Duty, from continuous monitoring, detection, and remediation for your S3 buckets and for your data. Is that a fair way of sort of representing the landscape of the problems and solutions here?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that customers want to ensure is, if I go back to my layered security paradigm, in addition to having the infrastructure protection, in addition to having the data protection, as well as key management controls, which are natively available in Amazon S3, they also want to layer that security with one, continuous monitoring, so that they have proactive visibility into who all is accessing my data. Then secondly, where is all my data? How much inventory do I have, and what changes are happening to that inventory? So that is really where Macie's inventory evaluation, as well as Guard Duty's threat detection, comes into play. I think, like you highlighted, we have taken away the burden from customers, where instead of them managing the raw log telemetry, some of that is natively integrated with Guard Duty, for instance, and then we apply our own managed threat intelligence, as well as our machine learning models, to then highlight findings which can tell customers known malicious threats and/or any abnormal activity on their data. And then when it comes to answering questions around, whether my ongoing addition to my infrastructure is secure. So it's usually, customers would put in checks and balances when they're starting fresh, but as their infrastructure scales and grows, they want to answer that question on an ongoing basis, which is where Security Hub comes handy. It continuously then integrates in the backend, and then is able to answer some of the security posture management questions for our customers as well. In addition to the security teams, one of the things I highlighted was that data governance teams, who want to answer whether or not they're adhering to some of the regulatory as well as compliance needs, in handling PII data or private information that they might be collecting from their customers, is where Amazon Macie comes in very handy to at least provide visibility to customers where all their sensitive data is, and then allowing them to add controls so that they can automate the data protection on that sensitive data.
That's a great point you make there at the end, bringing up Amazon Macie. We actually had a question from chat that's pretty relevant here. And so maybe this is just involving a little more explaining, but on the topic of granularity with Macie, could you go into sort of what are the options there? Like, does it have to always be the entire bucket? Can it be a sub route or subset of a bucket? Like, can we go sort of bottoms up and identify an object by object basis? What is the sort of the breadth of options on granularity for Macie targets?
Yeah, absolutely. So number one, as I mentioned, when you enable the service by default, it brings in information from your account or multiple accounts in one place, so you have visibility into all of your S3 bucket estate. You can see the bucket catalog. You can also view the details of the metadata of those buckets. To answer that question, you can indeed define the narrowed down scope and criteria of what you want to inspect in a bucket. So either you can inspect the full bucket, or you can define which objects you want to inspect on the basis of either file types, for example, file extensions, or when were those objects modified or last modified. We also recently added an option for prefixes that allows you to then define folder structures that you might have in your buckets. So using that prefix option, you can exclusively either include or exclude certain objects from inspection as well. And then there's other options such as object size that can further narrow down that object criteria.
Yeah, I'm jumping the gun a little bit here on who the next guest will be. That's going to be joining us to give the demo. But if I remember correctly, when I was chatting with you all on Amazon Macie, I remember that. Let's say I have a bunch of objects in a bucket, some of which are scannable by Macie and others of which may not be. If my memory serves correct, Macie will automatically not charge you for the file types that it can't manage. And the plus side of that is that you don't have to feel like you have to author an overly prescriptive config or move your data around based on how it's currently, designated in your buckets, just to avoid an errant bill that you're not getting value out of. Do I remember that correctly? Does Macie
Yeah,
do that?
that is absolutely correct. Yeah, you indeed remember that. That's the sharp memory, by the way. So yes, so Macie, when it's enabled, not only shows you how many total objects and the total data size that you have in your buckets, but it also shows you, how much of it is classifiable, which means what all can Macie actually inspect. So we actually go in and do that work for our customers. So when they select those buckets, Macie will actually only inspect what is supported or classifiable. So we have a published list of supported objects, which are big data, Parquet and Avro, or text files, archives, as well as document files. So those are the ones that will highlight that what is the size of classifiable objects, and then Macie will only automatically select those for inspection. And also it provides you pretty also flexible options in how often you want to inspect those, whether it's one time or an ongoing frequency of daily, monthly, weekly, and has some intelligence built in where it's only inspecting differential objects in a recurring scan job.